Okay, so I welcome participants for this 17th Zoom meeting. And today we have one important topic in spine. That's a spinal fractures, and that will be shared by Dr. Yogesh. Dr. Yogesh is a spine surgeon and consultant from Soundra Pandian Bone and Joint Hospital, Chennai, and he has joined with us to share his experiences about spinal fractures to us. Dr. Yogesh, you can go ahead. Dr. Yogesh,
Hello, Ram, is this audible?
you are audible. Please go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, guys. Today we'll see about the topic of glimpses of spine trauma. I'm not going to inside very detailed injuries and all the things. Hope everybody understands the basic mechanism, principles, and how to go ahead with the classification, and then manage accordingly based on the classification. So the agenda today is I'm going to present about the demographic profile compared to the Western studies, and then how to clear the cervical spine injuries, and then classification about cervical spine injuries, thoracolumbar spine injuries, and some case discussions. So as far as the demographic profile is concerned, when you see the etiology of spinal cord injury in the Western countries, it is mainly a vehicular or a road traffic accident followed by a falls. When compared to India, this is the most important landmark paper published by H.S. Chabra sir from Spinal Cord Center from Delhi. If you see the current study, it has been published in 2012. Again, when compared to the falls, the road traffic accidents has been increased in our country. Whereas the previous studies with respect to Shanmugha et al., Chako et al., and Dev et al., the predominant injury, spinal cord injury, is mainly due to the falls. It implies the high velocity injury mainly due to the Western accommodation of the culture and all the things. And this paper has told about many things about the epidemiology and the demography. First is the age. If you see 70% of the people comes under the second decade and third decade, most are males, and the educations are between high school and bachelor degree, 60%. And the most of the accidents or the trauma due to spinal cord injuries occurs at daytime. What we usually think is a night or early morning, which is totally wrong. And the predisposing factor here for a road traffic accident is not an alcohol, it's not a uncontrolled braking system or any other thing. It is mainly high speeding and improper judgment. So it is mainly an accident created by educated fellow in a daytime due to his moronness, not because of any other misjudgment. And spinal cord injury in certain states, when compared to certain northern states, and then western part of our country, where the agriculture is predominant, still spinal cord injury is mainly due to a fall from height because of the agriculture workers and all the thing. Second important agenda is the clearing of spine. So clearing of cervical spine in an emergency center is very a demanding process for cervical spine. And with respect to the spine surgeons, there are three types of patients. One is awake, alert, and asymptomatic patient, and two is awake and symptomatic patient, and three is obtunded patient. The average time required to clear a cervical spine injury in an awake, alert, and asymptomatic patient is 4 to 6 hours once the patient is handed over from an emergency team to us. So these are the following questions to be inquired in an history. One is whether the patient is having a neck pain, and on clinical examination whether any cervical tenderness is there, and examine the neurology carefully. Most important thing is when you rule out all the first 3 points, ask the patient to sit and ask whether any pain or any tenderness over the cervical spine. If still it is negative, then ask him to do a pain-free movement. If all the things are clear, then you can clear the patient from the cervical spine with immobilization and without a radiological evaluation. Radiological evaluation means not even without an X-ray. This awake and symptomatic patients, the average time required to clear these patients is around 15 hours, including the imaging timing. Patient with neck pain, tenderness, and neurological deficit will be clinically seen. Once they have a tenderness or any other neurological deficit, it is required to continue the immobilization with the cervical collar. And then in a high efficient trauma center, yeah, CT scan is possible. But in a small scale hospitals, the 3-weave radiographs is essential if the CT scan is not available. The 3-weave radiograph is nothing but an AP view of the cervical spine, lateral view of the cervical spine up to T1, and then open mouth view or an AP view to see the upper cervical spines, mainly an odontoid fracture. So if any pathology present, then you manage accordingly with the surgical or a non-surgical options. But if present, but if absent, then maintain the cervical immobilization. Patient can be imagined according to CT scan or MRI, and then they can be left alone. Third important is an obtunded patient. These are the very difficult patients to go according to the protocol. As far as the studies are concerned, no universally agreed protocol till now. So only thing is you need to discuss with the multiple consultants who are the primary one, either an emergency physician or a neurosurgeon or a cardiothoracic surgeon or a gastrosurgeon, and then immobilize your part with the hard cervical collar. So multiple screening CTs and MRI can be taken, but unless until patient has become conscious, you need to observe daily and then go accordingly for the cervical spine injuries with respect to the management. So cervical spine injuries are classified upper cervical spine injuries and subaxial cervical spine injuries. As well as the occiput C1 and C2 fractures and dislocations, the classifications are very clear with respect to the management, but the management part is a daunting and a complicated one with respect to the spine surgeon. So I'm not touching about the surgical options and complications with respect to the upper cervical spine. It is again a very wide variety and lot of controversies with respect to the management. We see about some glimpse about the subaxial cervical spine injuries and classification and COT syndromes and how to deal about that. So the most important landmark paper is the subaxial cervical spine injury classification. It is called SLIC classification given by Vaccaro et al. In 2007. It is divided into three, mainly by morphology, discoligamentous complex, and the neurological status. Each is given the grading based upon the morphology and then based upon the discoligamentous complex and the neurological status. So when you score this, if the score is more than 5, then it may be an operative treatment. When the score is less than 4, it may go for a non-operative treatment. And if the total score is 4, it depends upon the patient and the surgeon to decide the surgery and the non-operative management. So the recent classification, the Vaccaro classification is being widely used in a class in the current scenarios because previously we have been using Fugerson and Allen mechanism. If you see the homologous categories, the Fugerson is described into compression flexion, vertical compression, distraction flexion, compression extension, distraction extension, and lateral flexion. And these are being categorized with respect to SLIC morphology as compression, compression burst, translation, distraction, and translation. So when you put all together, it suits with the classification. So it is being widely used. The next most important classification is the AO spine subaxial classification. So I'm not going into the detail because the AO spine subaxial classification is not for the management purpose. It is mainly for the research purpose. So it starts from A, B, C. A is a compressive type and a stable injury. B is a distraction type, which may involve an anterior or posterior tension band injuries in the cervical spine. And C is a translation injury, which is an unstable one. So A, B, C are further subclassified. It is nothing based upon again a AO spine classification for TLIX. Facet injuries is subclassified into F1, F2, F3, F4, and neurological status into N0 to N4, and case-specific modifiers based upon the ligament injury, based upon the ankylosing spondylitis and other complex spinal injuries. So it's only a valuable tool for research purposes. For a cervical spine injuries, always use a SLIC classification so that it gives you a management whether you're going for a surgical option or a non-surgical option. Now, when come to the incomplete cord lesions, this is a split of a dorsal column. And when you see the dorsal column split of spinal cord, it has a corticospinal tract, spinothalamic tract, ventral column, and the dorsal column. So the corticospinal tract carries the most of the premotor tract motor activities. The spinothalamic and lateral column carries the pain and temperature and other sensations. And the dorsal column is mainly for the positioning, stereognosis, and etc. And the spatial orientation of the upper trunk, mainly the arm and neck, are oriented toward the medial aspect of the gray matter, whereas the lower trunk is being oriented away or lateral to the gray matter. So this is the main reason why when you get a central cord syndrome, you get a spinal shock below the level of injury. And when you observe the patients about the recovery pattern, the upper limb is more involved than the lower limb. It is because the spatial orientation of the arm and upper limb is more medial when compared to the lower trunk. So the prognosis of the central cord syndrome is good. Generally, patient recovers with some subtle neurological deficit or a delayed recovery. When compared to the anterior cord syndrome, this is the worst of all the cord syndrome. Though the patient is very incomplete, these injuries will be like taking long time for recovery. And number one, the most devastating part is all the major tracks are involved in that. So it's very difficult to get a recovery as far as the anterior cord injuries are concerned. Posterior cord injuries, again, good prognosis. And the Brown-Séquard syndrome is nothing but the hemitransaction of the cord following a gunshot injury or a knife injury. The peculiar part of the Brown-Séquard syndrome is there will be an ipsilateral loss of motor and the contralateral loss of pain and temperature due to the sensory depreciation which has been occurring at the level of cross section. So these are the injury classification, which is nothing but an incomplete spinal cord injuries, ICSS type. So central cord, anterior, ventral, anterior, posterior, and Brown-Séquard. And the good prognosis are central cord syndrome, posterior cord syndrome, and Brown-Séquard. Whereas in case of anterior cord, it is guarded prognosis. It's one of the landmark paper from KMC Manipal. It tells about the Skivura, how to get the neurological recovery based upon the MRI. So it's an MRI based study telling about what the neurological state, what the MRI findings with respect to cord edema, cord contusion, and hemorrhage deals with the outcome of a neurological deficit. So the initial neurological status, according to the study, correlates well with the MRI finding. The rate of neurological recovery and the final outcome is inversely proportional to the length of the cord involvement with respect to edema, contusion, and hemorrhage. So what I mean exactly is this first picture is a normal cord, and second picture is with respect to the cord edema, so which has been up to 2 or 3 segments, whereas the cord contusion is around 2 to 3 segments. If you see the last picture, the cord edema has progressed up to C2 in the initial part of the injury. That is from C2 to almost C7. So these kind of injury have a poor prognosis or the late recovery or the delayed recovery. Now, the most common injury in a pediatric spine is Skivura. It is nothing but spinal cord injury without a radiological abnormality. Why it is more common? It's because of the high head to torso ratio, underdeveloped neck musculature, and high water content of the intervertebral disc. These are the 3 important causes why Skivura occurs in pediatric spine. And the least important causes are laxity of spinal ligaments, shallow facet orientation, incomplete ossified and vegetable bodies. So steroid protocol, according to the NACS, it is mainly with respect to methylprednisolone, which is to be given within 8 hours. The dose is 30 mg per kg, then infusion 5.4 mg per kg per hour. Infuse for 24 hours, then the bolus is given within 3 hours of injury. Infuse the methylprednisolone for 48 hours if the bolus is given 3 to 8 hours of injury. No benefit of methylprednisolone is started after 8 hours, and no benefit with naloxone and other neuroprotectives. Timing of surgery is being classified into 4 types: emergency less than 8 hours, early 80 to 20 hours, intermediate less than 72 hours, late more than 72 hours. Emergency and early has a good prognosis, whereas immediate and late, according to various studies, have different improvement in the Frankel and the Asia grade, but very negligible, whereas emergency and early when compared to the intermediate and late have a better prognosis. Now the fourth one is the thoracolumbar spine injury. So the thoracolumbar spine injury is, again, we are going to see about the TLIX classification. So I'm going to spend some time with respect to the TLIX classification, because based upon this, we are going to see the case discussions and classify and management. So the TLIX classification is based upon 3 critical factors. One is the morphology, PLS integrity, and then neurological status. So injury morphology is divided into compression, flexion, burst, translational, and distraction. Based upon the scores are increased. Then posterior ligamentous complex integrity is divided into intact, intermediate, and injured. And then neurological involvement and grading. So the total grade severity score is 1 to 10. Again, the gray area is the score of 4, whereas the less than 1 to 3 is non-operative and more than 5 is operative treatment. So to stretch this classification, they want to find out the neurological pattern and proper documentation of each and every pattern of a fracture. So AO Spine and Vaccaro again join hands to give this evaluation of 3 parameters with respect to morphological classification, neurological classification, and clinical modifiers. This is nothing but again an AO Spine classification where we need to understand the injury morphology. Type A is a compression fractures, and type A is divided into A0, A1, A2, A3, and A4. A0 is nothing but either a isolated spinous process fracture or a transverse process fracture. When a wedge compression involving a single end plate, it is called A1. Split is also called as a Spencer fracture, which involves two end plates of the anterior column. And A3 is an incomplete burst where it involves only either an upper end plate or a lower end plate with a comminution and no retropulsion. A4 is a complete burst with involvement of entire anterior and middle column and some posterior ligamentous column. B is a distraction type of injuries. B1 is nothing but the transverse tension band disruption due to chance fracture. B2 is a posterior tension band involvement along the ligaments. And C is a translation injury. B3 is a hyperextension injury where it goes through a disc basis, most common in case of ankylosing spondylitis. So now again it has been divided into neurologically N0, N1, N2, N3, N4, N5, NX, and modifiers M1 and M2. So modifiers M1 is sometimes you get a burst fracture, but in an MRI, you don't have a ligamentous complex injury, or you may miss an intensity with respect to either an MRI waves. So these are the one which has been in fact intended to do whether you are going for a surgical management or non-surgical management. So these are classified as M1 modifiers. M2 modifiers are nothing but a spinal cord injury which occurs secondary to ankylosing spondylitis, rheumatoid arthritis, and others. So how to read the AO spine classification? It is not from identifying from A, B, C. It is in a reverse order. You need to start from C, B, A. First, when you get a X-ray lateral view of thoracolumbar spine, you see for the any translation injuries. So when it is not having any translation or a dislocation injuries, then the type C is ruled out. Then you see for any B-type injuries, for example, an anterior or posterior distraction or spinous process opening or any spinal process malalignment. If that is not there, then you rule out type B injury. Then you come to A and then classify accordingly with respect to the CT scan. It needs an A0 or A1 or A2 or A3 or A4. Any doubts till now?
Yogesh, go ahead. We'll at the end we'll continue.
Okay. So one most important thing, you have seen an incomplete burst on the classification and a complete burst for the classification. It is not same like a stable burst and an unstable burst. The unstable burst to be predicted from a CT scan, it has to have a following 5 findings or either 2 or 3 from this. Either a loss of height more than 50%, kyphotic angle more than 20 degree, substantial posterior column injury, progressive deformity with respect to kyphosis or either a loss of height, and a progressive neurological deficit. So from now we start about the case discussions. So this is a 36-year-old male comes to an emergency center with back pain following a road traffic accident. He was traveling in a car, and following which he has difficulty in getting up and loading the spine. The neurology is normal. So when you see the X-ray, so you need to apply a Telix classification in that. So first you need to rule out is reversing the order of classification. Type C injury is there or not. Obviously there is no type C injury. And then you have to go for type B. From this X-ray, it's very difficult to find whether you have a ligamentous injury or a chance fracture. So after seeing an X-ray, it is an A1N0. A1 is nothing but looks like a wedge compression fracture for me. Uh, Anybody about any investigations? What to order for the next, and then how to go ahead with the classification?
I think I'll go ahead with doing an CT.
So CT shows a wedging, but when you see the upper end plate and the comminution, it looks like a burst, stable burst, because there is no retropulsion, there is no obvious kyphosis. But when you go, so I thought of, okay, putting it into A3N0. A3 is nothing but an incomplete burst. But going through the posterior ligamentous complex, then comes, you can see a fracture line running throughout the vertebra through the pars. So that tells it is not an A type injury, it's a B type bony injury, nothing but a classical chance fracture. So this is the MRI of the same patient, where you can see the contusion of the anterior part of the cord, and posteriorly you can see some buckling is happening over the ligamentum fleum and hyperintensity changes in the posterior ligamentous complex. So now the total grade of the injury with respect to Telix is, it is a distraction injury. When compared to the PLC integrity, it is injured, so grade 3.3, and neurologically the patient is intact. So the total score is 7. And according to the classification, the score from 5 to 10 is for operative. Now, one more important thing to differentiate is in the scoring, it can be a distraction injury and it can be a flexion burst. So how to differentiate these both things in the scoring is the following important differentiation. When a 3-column burst fracture, the most common thing, there will be a canal compromise, and there will be a bony retropulsion, there will be a post-traumatic kyphosis, there will be a middle column height decrease. Whereas in case of flexion distraction injury, this won't be there, and there won't be any canal compromise, and there won't be any bony retropulsion. Now you can see the MRI, and again, when comparing these is due to a flexion burst or distraction injury, it's very well concluded that it is a distraction injury because there is no retropulsion and no bony canal encroachment or spinal canal encroachment. So this is the management done for this patient because the chance fracture, which is unstable, gone for posterior spinal fixation. So the next case is a 23-year-old female comes to an emergency center with this kind of picture.
Can we ask the doubts in between of the last case?
Yeah.
Rakesh, go ahead. Ask.
About the last case, first thing is the number of the screws and the rod, whatever you used, is it standard, or we usually go for 4, like 2 levels above, and you have put 8 screws and rod there.
Yeah.
So
No, what is your question exactly? Whether it can be a short fixation or long fixation?
Yeah.
So it is for a short fixation, but when I seen the edema at T12 and T11, I thought of fixing it that also, because I don't want any complaint from this patient again, some kind of back pain and coming back to me. Yeah, it has been an overkilling to the patient. I agree with your point. But if there is no edema in T12 and T11, I would have fixed only T12, L1 and L2 as short fixation.
So for this, you have put D12, L1, L2, and D11, all
Yes.
including the fracture site, 2 screws.
Yes.
Okay. And can you explain once again the distraction injury? How was it classified as distraction injury? 4 points in injury morphology.
What?
The Telix scoring system, you
Yeah.
classified it as a distraction injury with 4 points. How did you do that? For what reason?
Yeah. So if you go back, you see it's a posterior ligamentous injury, a chance fracture, which is it's been distracting the posterior ligamentous complex. Number 1. So it can be either put into the classification of a flexion burst when respect to the injury morphology is concerned, or a distraction injury. For this only, I compared the next one, thoracolumbar burst fracture and flexion extraction injury. Based upon these one, I decided to put it as a 4 rather than 2.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay, so because there is no bony canal encroachment and a spinal canal encroachment, and there is no retropulsion in this, and the distraction is very clearly seen posteriorly in a CT scan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Rajan Babu.
So, can somebody read this X-ray?
Dr. Rajan?
So
I think
this is,
hello,
Vijay.
can you hear me?
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Yogesh, I have one question regarding your previous management. Did you try to consider MIS screws for that case?
Consider?
MIS.
MIS fixation.
Yeah, MIS is a good option. I have not considered for two things. One is radiation issues,
Okay.
and second is surgical timing. These two.
Okay. And the importance of the cross connector, was it to reconstruct the PLC? Is that why you did it, or?
No, it is for a rotational stability, which has been published in most of the articles for a chance fracture at the level of T12 or L1 junction.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Hello, sir.
Yes, Guna.
Sir, I have a doubt, sir. What about rod contouring, sir? When do you contour the rods? In this case, did you contour or?
This case, I put a straight rod. If you see the pre-op, there'll be a minimal amount of kyphosis at T12 and L1. And
Yes,
in the junctions, mostly everybody puts a straight rod and they won't distract because the straight rod alone will act as a distracting force.
Okay, okay, sir. Okay. But if we put a straight rod in a long segment fixation, is there any chance of screw pull out on later, sir? Or
Still now, we don't have any issues with respect to the screw pull out in the junction unless until the pedicle screws are properly put.
okay, sir.
Yes, it may be in a long segment lumbar or a long segment thoracic.
Okay, okay, okay.
So
Thank
one
you.
more question here. The length of the rods are different.
It's a mismatch. I agree. It is an on-table decision because I don't have a rod cutter on the day.
Okay.
So does it make any difference?
I hope
Yeah,
so.
when it has been the rod, when it has been the length of the rod, when it has been involving or damaging the upper facets, it makes a difference.
Yeah, that I agree. But the difference in size of the rods, does it make any difference actually?
Yeah, does it not cause the soft tissue, at least minimum the pain on the rod which has the length?
No, the one which is long can impinge on the above and below facets if there is a movements. That is facetal impingements, but I don't feel there is a difference. In this case, there should be an issue with the impingement of the facets.
Okay.
Yeah, next case, Dr. Yogesh.
So this is a 24-year-old girl, road traffic accident, bike injury.
Once again, any discussions we can come up. This is just the last part of the presentation. I feel it's only cases, so we can.
Yeah, it's only cases now.
Yeah, any thing, comments, questions can be discussed at each end of the case itself. So once he finishes the case, we'll have a small time for discussion. Then we'll go to the next case. Yeah, go ahead.
So A3, the patient has come. I thought, okay, in the night they given a call with respect to this injury. First, seeing this, I thought, okay, nothing is there. Okay, some kind of L5 fracture. According to the classification, it may be like a wedging or a kind of incomplete burst. So patient is neurologically intact and she itself walked down to the casualty for the treatment. So just given an LS corset and asked her to get the CT scan and MRI. So what the girl has done is gone to the other surgeon and taken multiple opinions. They done an MRI and MRI showed an upper end plate fracture with the minimal retropulsion. So everybody advised with the LS corset and minimal rest. And after 1 week, she came with severe leg pain radiating towards a left lower limb, and paresthesia at the L5 dermatome, mainly the first dorsal web space. So the MRI is repeated after 1 week along with the CT. Now you can see the retropulsion very clearly, which has been compressing the L5 nerve root. It is very difficult to find this case, this type of cases, like specifically isolated compression with respect to an injury. After an injury, usually when a patient comes with a dermatome, you will be eager enough to see what happened to the disc. But in this case, when you see the upper end plate retropulsing backward, and retrospectively, when you go back and see the MRI and CT scan, it is a burst fracture with minimal retropulsion. So the patient got admitted, and then I told for the surgery to decompress and then fixation. Again, she taken a multiple opinions and then came back finally accepting for the surgery. So after 1 week, the L5 burst is gone to the A3, and the neurological level N1 is involvement of a single nerve root, that is L5. So now going to the TLIX classification, it's a flexion burst. There is no any distraction injury posteriorly. The PLC is intact and nerve root is involved, so it is 2 points. So when you go to the score, it is 4. It is a little bit of a gray area. People waited even for a neurological deficit. People even waited with a single nerve injury with respect to non-operative management in a literature. And some people have been managed with surgical options. So since this patient came out with multiple opinions from the surgeons, if it has been impinging on the nerve root, needs a surgery, I offered a surgery, and just I fixed it L4 and S1, and then contoured the rods accordingly and decompressed the nerve root left side and freed the L5. So any other surgical options in this patient, or what are the non-operative decisions can be continued? Any other opinion from the house?
No, I think surgery was correct. This is the management, because apart from the classification, I think symptoms also should be given priority.
Even the classification, when you apply, the score comes to around 4. That falls in the gray area, and I also will go for a surgery. The radicular pain.
So everybody accepts the management. We'll go for the next case.
Dr. Yogesh, this is Raghu here.
Raghu sir.
Raghu sir.
I have one doubt. This lamina fracture or posterior element fracture, do you consider them as a PLC complex injury?
So lamina fracture and the spinous process fracture, it comes under type B classification, sir.
Okay. So we cannot include this into the TLIX.
Yeah, in the TLIX classification, that is what, sir. If the patient may have a burst fracture and a spinous process fracture, patient may have a burst fracture and a transverse process fracture and the posterior element like lamina. So what happens is, that is what the previous classification has told. And going back to the morphology of avospine classification, so that's how the modifiers has come. In case of a burst fracture, it doesn't mean you have to have a posterior ligament injury seen in the MRI. It may be a lamina fracture, or it may be a spinous process fracture, which may be missed in an MRI. Whereas this can be put it as a modifier M1, and this modifier or with respect to the unknown posterior ligamentous injury or an undetermined posterior ligamentous injury. You're okay with the point, sir?
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yogesh.
Hello?
Yogesh, Vignesh here.
Vignesh, tell me.
Hi, man. Regarding this case, why you hadn't put any specific reason for not putting the screw in the fractured vertebra?
Yeah, one is that is a site where the nerve root is injured. I want to put the screw at L5. on the other side of the
Yeah.
pedicle,
Okay.
but thought of, okay, got a good height and a good decompression and planned for a implant removal later on. So I thought, why need to do?
So you hadn't fused it.
Yeah, I infused it because she's an young girl and it's a lumbosacral area. So I want to remove the implant by 6 to 8 months.
Okay, then that's fine, man. Thank you.
That was an interesting case, Yogesh.
So the next case. So this is a patient with history of road traffic accident and comes with pain and again a neuro intact patient. So straightforward, we go to the CT scan. There is no retropulsion. It is an A3 injury and neurological intact. So this case I need to discuss in the forum. What is the option given and what can be an option given by a surgeon and what is the option taken by the patient? So when you see the grading, it is only total score of 2. Okay. So it is a stable burst in a 32-year-old engineer who is highly demanding. So what are the options can be given as far as the surgeon is concerned? So everybody will go for non-operative, right? With the thoracolumbar brace.
Let's show the X-ray once again. The images.
It's at L1.
L1. How is the MRI? Is there any interligamentous edema?
No, I don't have an MRI and I have not taken the MRI for this patient. I straight away told non-operative with thoracolumbar brace and come back after 1 or 2 weeks.
Why no MRI, sir? MRI, I think it's needed.
No, in the CT itself, I don't find any distraction or any other thing. And the middle column and the posterior, there is no posterior retropulsion. So I thought we can wait for it.
Just for a discussion. Still, I feel MRI is needed to see the cord, sir. What do you feel?
Rather than a cord, I would like to see the interspinal
Cord, neural structures and all.
interspinous ligaments in an MRI.
Yeah.
Mild interspinous widening can be seen, sir.
Yeah, even in cases, see, whatever these things are done, CT and provided X-ray is taken in standing, you may not be able to see the interspinous widening. So when you do an MRI, even those things can be identified by some amount of edema.
Especially the signal intensity changes with respect to PLC injury can be seen.
Yeah. So in that condition, I would, if MRI is not done, I would put the PLC complex score as indeterminate, and then I would find out the score once again.
So what I spoken to the patient is non-operative and with thoracolumbar brace and come back after 2 weeks for an X-ray. But he came back by another 3 days with respect to the personal reasons. He inquired 2-3 people and forcefully want me to do the surgery. So as a surgeon, what is the possibilities you have to think? And as a surgeon, you try to convince the patient or you go for the surgery. It is now a surgeon perspective.
At least I will do an MRI once again.
I will do an MRI and then straight away go for surgery.
Then what is the point of doing MRI then?
What is the point of doing MRI now if the patient is insisting the surgery?
No, man. If we are planning for surgery, as Ram said, I will see the interspinous space distraction or any ligamentous injury in the MRI.
Okay, Vignesh.
If that is justifying, then I will also get convinced and go for surgery. Or else then I will tell the patient no need of surgery.
No, that is what it has been told. There is no need for surgery to come. He has inquired 2 people and came back. Doctor, I have to go to the work. And he is a marketing fellow, need to roam around. So,
okay.
I would say, if that is the scenario, the patient is insisting on a surgery, And I would say go to another doctor who is going to do surgery for you, if it is not an indication.
Yogesh, Rajan here. Okay. Based on the CT scan, the posterior vertebral wall looks intact to me.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm not very completely sure if it is a compression or a burst.
Yeah,
and then another thing, an MRI will also give an idea whether there are any skip lesions. Because in this type of condition, we more than once we see an additional upper level also some amount of edema in the body. So if his main symptom is pain, then we have percutaneous methods of alleviating the pain rather than going for a fully fledged surgery. There are other options which you can consider.
Yeah, other options of medications, many things considered, and he's been told to get surgery from others also. This case has put mainly with respect to the surgeon ideas and perspectives, not from the patient side, because the patient wants surgery.
Yeah, that is what once they're fixated on that, and no other conservative treatment will be effective for them.
The reason for surgery from patient's perspective is what?
Go back to the work immediately.
That even after surgery, he has to take some rest. He can't just
he cannot be back to his work in 3 days. I don't know. He might not go back to work in 3 days.
He was advised to take, even after surgery, 2 weeks bed rest. The 2 week rest is needed, not complete. But his argument is it is not a bed rest what has been with the non-operative management. And main concern is there is nobody to help him in the home.
The question here comes is, if I feel it to be a stable element, then I would make them to mobilize, even if it is not a surgery. I would just give him a brace that is more of a muscle support, and I will make him to mobilize.
Agree with the point.
Hello?
Agree with the points.
Just for
Ram, Yogesh,
argument's sake, just for an argument's
sake. I got a small
sake.
question to you. Ram, Yogesh, at how many weeks you will be mobilizing a patient if you are treating them conservatively with the brace?
With the brace,
I will put it on the patient with respect to pain.
Correct. That's it.
If pain is less, I'll ask them to mobilize.
The brace is not going to hold the fracture.
Yeah, that's what, because as per his pain threshold, we have to work on it. He was convinced by our colleagues. The same thing as Ram told, better to get any of our colleagues' opinion. That's what we can do. We can't go with the words of the patient on operating him.
Yeah. Is there any role for vertebroplasty here?
He's an young patient.
No.
Patient,
No.
Because of the age?
No. It's because of age. No, age. It's palliative surgery. Vertebroplasty is a palliative surgery. Like a metastasis, you do a vertebroplasty. In fact, this vertebroplasty was started for metastatic fractures. And for a patient who has a good healing capacity, no, absolutely no.
Okay.
Excuse me, sir.
So what is done for this patient is a posterior spinal fixation. So the option I have taken is based upon the patient purely and not by any other thing.
So he went back to work in how many days, Dr. Yogesh?
Yeah, after 2 weeks, I think he has gone to the work.
Okay.
Main work is traveling, Ram. It's not about sitting one place, it is traveling.
Hello, sir.
Yeah?
Sir, did you decompress, sir? Or?
No, I didn't decompress, just fixation and came back.
Okay.
Did you fuse it, or you're planning to remove the screws later?
If we come back, I'll remove the screws.
Okay. But you're not done fusion?
No, I have not done a fusion. It's only an instrumented fixation, that's all.
So one question to the house here. So if you have done an open exposure, okay, and you have put pedicle screws, and if you are not doing an interbody fusion, so what thing you are saying as fusion? Applying a bone graft over the lamina?
No, preparing the lamina and making it a suitable bed for the fusion. Just putting screws is an instrumental fusion.
Because sometimes I feel I'm not the correct. It's my personal view. The exposure itself is making most of the times the facets to fuse.
Yes. Depend on how much cautery you use over the lamina and or the
Yeah.
facet.
So, sir, I have 2-3 questions here. In the thing, do you often put screws in the fractured vertebra? One, and when you have opened up, in this case, for example, why do you, if MRI was done and there was little bit compression, why don't you go for a decompression? Why only fixation? And the third thing is, after you do fixation, I don't think that preparing lamina and all is every time required, because it is already fused in the sense. So what are your opinions, sir?
No, see, if you plan to remove the screws, the thing is that you will not plan for a fusion because he's young, and it depends upon how many mobile segments you are involving in your level. It is a junctional, so it doesn't matter here. But if it is, say, lower down in the lumbar, it's always better to temporarily fuse it. And then once the fracture is healed, you remove the screws. So you will have a near normal spine in the future.
Sorry, one more question. How many times do you remove the screws, and what is the indication of removing the screws? Like in what patients do you remove the screws?
Any stable fractures where the primary fixation is only for pain relief and mobilization, once the fracture is healed and the pain is relieved, then you can remove the screws. Provided the posterior ligament, you're not in a massive decompression and the posterior ligament is complex is intact.
See, Dr. Rakesh, to the question of removal of the screws, it should be considered in a young patient.
Yes.
And done a short segment fixation in an by an MIS procedure. And obviously when you did a surgery, which means an unstable spine only, and you will do a CT, and you have to find out whether the fracture has been healed. In sense, it is like you do a surgery for a forearm, it unites, right? And the purpose of the implant is finished. Here we are crossing the joints. So once the fracture is healed, bony structures has healed, then you can remove, thinking that the your joints and disc spaces are still working, and so as to regain the mobility. And that will be usually carried out in the lower lumbar segments, and the segments like thoracolumbar where there is a limited mobility, advantages are very few. And I have some vague memory of reading some papers remotely that even in an MIS fixation, I'm not talking about open surgeries, even in an MIS fixation, removing the implants has no additional advantage of bringing back the mobility. What they say is, you just put a screw, it goes for most of the times fusion, most of the times. So I have not removed an implant for surgeries.
My next question was that, sir, how many screws have you removed till now?
I have done a lot of MIS fixations, but still I have not removed it. And most of the times they are in thoracolumbar, and no. And one case which we have removed is because of the impingement of the rod screws. Sometimes these patients goes for muscle atrophy around because of your procedure per se, and it is skin, excess bursa, and those things are the indications, in sense, the implant prominence. Those are the times which I remove. Otherwise, for regaining mobility, no.
Same here, sir. Same here. Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Ram, adding to your point,
Yeah.
Normally I remove screws by almost 1.5 years. Max, after 1 year, I keep an eye, I do an X-ray, because I had seen couple of patients who come after 2 years in the thoracolumbar junction with rod cutouts. So I prefer removing the screws and rods only in the thoracolumbar junction after 1.5 years. If I had done it in thoracic spine and I leave it off, if I do it in lumbar spine also, if I do it in lumbar and thoracolumbar junction, I remove the screws and rods after 1.5 years.
So the rod fractures, you want to say?
Yeah, I had seen couple of rod fractures.
So which means that particular zone has not united, healed, not fused, What are
The patient was having mobility at that places, on those places where I had seen after the rod cutout, I had done some dynamic views. There is no movement in the fracture side. It's the movement happens more at the disc spaces. And I have a follow-up of a couple of patients whom I had removed the implants also. They are doing well. No further kyphosis or anything like that.
So, okay. We want to see that the normal movement is happening and that has produced a fracture.
Yeah.
Sir, in case of incomplete breast fracture with retropulsion bony fragment and patient having normal neurology, that time we have to do decompression or not, sir?
What is the question?
Depends on the level.
He's saying, Dr. Yogesh, he is asking a question, Dr. Nitin Goyal from Delhi, correct?
Yes, sir. If
Asking a
patient
question with yeah, you ask the question, Dr. Nitin, please.
Sir, patient with unstable breast fracture and there is a retropulse bony fragment, but patient have normal neurology. In those cases, we have to do decompression or not, sir?
Patient with an unstable fracture, it depends upon the fracture fragment, how big it is in the CT scan, number one. If the fragment is big enough, but still it's only with the cord contusion or some other thing, but neurology is normal, yes, I will decompress. But when the fragments are less and it comes by the distraction, I won't. Indirect decompression, I mean.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, you can go to the next question. The next case, sorry.
So 36-year-old lady, fall from height, sustained an ankle fracture along with this L1 fracture and Asia B in neurology. So bilateral paraplegia with sensory intact. And this is the CT scan with an unstable burst and a big fragment in the neural canal. So it is not a type C injury and it is not a type B injury. As far as the CT scan is concerned, it is A4 and N3 because of a cord injury. Now this is the MRI, which shows a retropulsion of the big fragment with compression of the spinal cord and the edema progressing up to T11. Now it is A4, N3 and M1. So for people who ask, there is a posterior ligamentous injury, is there or not? So we can include that, the classification B or not. This is the answer. This comes under a modifier M1, where I can see some changes in the MRI with respect to posterior ligamentous complex, but not very conclusive. So the TLX scoring system, so flexion burst, the PLC integrity is intermediate, and it's an incomplete neurological involvement. So the total score is 7, and this is the surgery done. Any other options or any other criticism? Welcome.
Sir, while operating this patient, if there is a lamina, posterior elements are fractured.
Yeah, I done an open decompression because I need to decompress the cord because of the neurological deficit. And
that, sir, my question is that while opening this patient, while doing surgery, if there is so much posterior element fracture is there, suppose lamina, spinous process are fractured.
No, there is no posterior lamina fracture.
No, he's asking intra findings.
Okay.
During intra, then it will be, sir, still it will be the breast fracture or flexion restriction injury.
No, that is what I am telling. Why I added the modifier in the classification. See, this M1 has come from the AO spine morphological classification. Okay, so the modifiers M1 and M2 are involved in the classification. M1 means, very clearly I am saying again, there is no lamina fracture, there is no ligamentous injury which has been obviously seen in an MRI or a CT. So it can be seen, or any edema changes in the introp or a signal changes in the MRI. For example, if you see the classification, the PLC integrity is divided into intact, intermediate and injured. Injured, you know very clearly from the MRI, it is injured or not. So you put a grade as 3 points. But where this indeterminate come from? This indeterminate come from the modifiers. Any questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, what was the interpreted finding? PLC was intact or was it disrupted?
PLC were disrupted.
Okay.
So how was the pedicle, Yogesh, the fracture?
Pedicle is good, but I ain't tried putting screws. I gone with the preoperative planning itself is to fix 2 level above and 2 level below and maintain the height of the L1 and cross link and come out.
Any particular reason that you didn't want to put there?
What?
Any particular reason that you didn't want to put in fracture screw?
No, any reason.
Okay.
Was there any dural tear or anything intraoperatively in this patient?
No, no dural tear.
Dural tear. Okay.
This patient anyway was immobilized with the ankle cast, and then 3 months she had a tremendous improvement in with walking with the support, and then at the end of 1 year follow-up she was able to walk independently with bilateral foot drop, which is being supported by a brace, and walk independently. Moved to Asia D.
Very good.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
I have one question about regarding putting a screw in fractured vertebra. What are the opinions of the house to when to put and when not to put? And in a burst fracture like this, it is obvious that it will be in this one. It is the right idea to not to put the screw in the fractured site. What is the opinion of the house?
I would,
No, the screw which you are going to put in the fracture site is a small screw, and it is not. I feel it is not going to distract the fractures as far as my opinion is concerned. So I not put the screws purposefully because it is what the thing I planned and went and executed and came out. I not even tried putting a screws in this L1.
there are two school of thoughts. So the persons who came to put screws used to put a shorter screw only in the pedicle and some part going into the body, thinking that it might disrupt the fracture healing of the particular fracture. And the other people think that even if it is going inside the body, it is not going to harm the fracture healing. But my personal belief is that I used to put a shorter screw so that because I feel that majority of the hold is from the pedicle, and even in a normal bone, the majority hold is from the pedicle. So I used to put it only in the pedicle with a short screw, say something 25, 30, that's it. Just additional posterior support.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you.
Rakesh, your answer is for like your question is for this next case.
Yeah.
So this is a girl fall from height, 18 years, presented to the casualty with Asia B. There is zero power below the knees, some kind of sensation intact in the hips and knees. And when you see the construct of the fracture, it is a total comminuted burst fracture, unstable, with posterior retropulsion and the big fragment in the canal. And the coronal picture shows the amount of comminution anteriorly which is there. So she was A4, N3 during the presentation. And this is the MRI of the patient. Burst fracture with retropulsion and the cord compression. So again, if you see, there is only some kind of edema where the posterior ligamentous complex looks like intact in the T2 weighted images. So again, I put this into A4, N3. It's a kind of modifier 1, so that in a TLC score, it comes with an intermediate injury. So now with the TLX classification, it is a flexion burst. Posterior ligament integrity is injured. And then it is an incomplete injury. So the total score is 8. So Rakesh, so I put a screw in this fracture.
Yes, sir. Sir, I
Single,
personally,
single short screw. Because she's an young girl, it is a lumbar segment. I don't want to go for a longer fixation. I selected a shorter fixation, number one. And I selected a posterior surgery because of the retropulsion and severe cord compression, where the retropulsed fragment is in the canal. If that is not there, anterior is an option for the people who does lot of anterior surgeries, because as far as the literature is concerned, anterior are the direct surgeries where you have a thorough decompression and the neurological recovery is very better when compared to the posterior surgeries in the lumbar anterior surgeries, though it is a morbid one. So I put a screws, I done a laminectomy and then and gone from one side, then press the fragment directly inside the vertebra, and then a posterolateral fusion. You can see the bone graft in the X-ray posterolaterally, prepare the bed of transverse process, and this is the X-ray poster. Any comments?
Why screws only on one side?
It was like interop finding. I think it's comments.
Any reason, Yogesh? Yogesh? Is there still with us? Hello, presenter.
Hello.
I think he went off or disconnected.
Hello.
Yeah,
Yes, hello.
Hi, Ram. Dheeraj here.
Dheeraj, sir.
Hi, Ram. I just had one point. I mean, all said and done, I tend to differ in this
Come back.
X-ray. I would rather put a longer screw at the fractured vertebra, and you see the superior, anterosuperior corner of the fractured vertebra. You see in the post-op X-ray also. I'll try targeting that with my screw and consider putting it like a lag effect. So what we have been doing is we've been putting longer screws and try to pass the screw just beneath the, in the subchondral region, just to provide a like a buttressing effect. And we've done some of those post-op X-rays look absolutely near normal, because I don't know, I tend to differ, and we have been putting that longer screw at the
Longer
fracture.
screw. Okay.
We've done both. Initially we are doing the shorter screws, and for the past I think few years we have been passing a longer screw, and what we have felt is the longer screw actually, when you follow it up on periodic visits, you see that the collapse tend to be lesser in the ones which you use a longer screw, and when you pass the screw just below the upper end plate or the fractured end plate, and
So you're basically saying it like a wrapped screw for a tibial plateau.
Perfect. Yeah, something like that.
It doesn't collapses, it holds the fracture.
Something like that. Yeah, and that and the anterosuperior fragment, it's like it gets lag effect like thing. No, not a classical lag screw, because in a lag screw you'll have to the pilot hole and the distal fragment, the proximal fragment hole should be wider to get the lag effect. But something like that.
The concept which you told is wrapped screw. That's
Sorry?
a point. Wrapped screw. RAF, wrapped screw. Plateau fractures. That's a point taken, sir. Well point.
Yeah, thank you, Ram. Thank you, Dr. Yogesh. Nice presentation. Good.
Yogesh got disconnected because of power cut.
Yeah, probably internet connection.
Yeah. No, power cut.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I think there was one more case which was with respect to anterior reconstruction. The last case which he showed can be dealt with posterior procedure and whether to go in from front or not is based on another classification called as Gaines load sharing classification. So that helps in deciding the anterior surgery is needed or not after doing a posterior procedure. So I don't think he'll be able to join now. So I just quickly say about what is the Gaines load sharing classification for the purpose of winding up this lecture. So then, am I audible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the purpose of Gaines load sharing classification is that you have done a beautiful surgery from behind, and we want to know whether we have to do a anterior surgery or not. So that purpose is solved by Gaines classification, where they take into 3 points to consider.
Can you able to hear?
Yeah. Good. I think you can show up the last case because I thought of starting up. You share up the screen, Dr. Ramesh. So meanwhile, the Gaines load sharing classification takes into account the 3 points. One is the fracture combination, another is the fracture opposition, and one more point which it takes is the amount of kyphosis correction post surgery, posterior surgery. So it's like you do there is a burst fracture, you have reconstructed from behind, you have applied ligamental taxis principle. Then you want to know whether the anterior has to be reconstructed or not, is the one which is being decided by it. So if the fracture combination is very high, and if the fracture fragments are widely separated, not opposed to each other, and the kyphosis correction is much better with posterior surgery, then these 3 points, if it is in a higher grade, you have to go in front, and then you have to reconstruct so as to give an additional support so that the posterior implants do not go for failure. That's what the load sharing classification says. Yogesh, you can show up the case. Yogesh? Hello, Yogesh? Hello? So that last case, this is that case which is 543 L3 fracture, burst fracture, and this was operated with actually this is my case. It was operated in Sakra Hospital, and my doctor mentor Satish did from anterior procedure, and I did posterior. So it was dealt with first in MIS screws from behind, L2 to L4 without any screws in the fracture vertebra, and we went in front, and then we reconstructed the anterior fracture fragments with an expandable cage. So I couldn't share because this PowerPoint is with him, but I think
You can able to hear?
Yogesh, you are going and coming back, man. So just show up the last case. No? I actually completed the case presentation of the last. Can I show the post-op?
Can see the slides?
Yeah, I could see. You come to the 53rd, 51 slide, 52nd. Yeah, you can talk about the Gaines. I spoke about Gaines.
Yeah. So this patient, they have chosen very clearly.
I told them this was pre-op. I showed them, and I told that this surgery was done here, and we told that this is reconstruction. The reason also. So your opinion, okay. Dr. Yogesh.
So opinion about this is, if it's been a single surgeon in a center, I would definitely go for only posterior and not even think about the anterior surgery, and not even look into this classification, because you shared and it has been importance is known. That's a new learning for me. That's all I can tell about this.
Yeah, actually, when I did this posterior procedure itself, I felt the you can show the pre-op ones. MRI you show that's a significant collapse, but on reconstruction with posterior procedure itself, it opened up nicely, and and everything has been reconstructed. Yeah, this everything, it came back to near normal position in just posterior fixation itself. And gains, according to gains, if I imply that needs an anterior procedure, but personally, I also feel that gains classification. Any Rathi Babu?
Yeah.
Any message on that? Because I feel you the last once again go back to the slide. The gains classification, yeah. Reducibility of the sagittal deformation. This point I was misinterpreting for many days, and recently, a few years back, I came to know that the amount of kyphosis correction, if it is good, then it has done anterior also. That's what this classification says.
So the timing for the anterior surgery, it is to be done immediately or it has some specific time run?
Same sitting, same sitting.
But there is one school of argument for an A4 fracture where there is pure involvement of the vertebral body. A pure anterior surgery itself is enough. There is no need to augment with the posterior.
Yeah, correct. Provided you are fixing it also from anterior.
Yeah, you put a plate and fix it.
Yeah, but yeah. So
but of course, it depends on the center. It depends whether you have an access surgeon to help you out.
Yeah,
no,
Ram,
this exposure was done by me actually. We don't have access. We have access surgeons, but lumbar, thoracolumbar we do, and thoracic levels, cutting the, deflating the lungs, my mentor does it.
Okay, very good. Yeah.
So this procedure, anterior surgery is actually, in fact, easy, I would say, rather than you do it from posterior, you make the bleed a lot, but anterior surgery, it is like a bloodless field. It is like an ACDF approach.
Okay.
Initial days when I started my career in Pondicherry, I used to take access surgeons. Then after that, I felt it's not that big to open it from front also. And with that, we started doing VOLIF also, just a tubes placement. Actually, in fact, if you start doing anterior, you will feel like it is much more easy than the posterior.
Oh, okay.
But we have shifted the entire spine surgery to posterior is all because of one single reason: pedicle screws. Pedicle screws. That's the one which made us to shift from anterior to posterior. It does almost all works. So, any questions? Yogesh, you points to add it. Is he still there or he left off once again?
Yeah.
Points. Yogesh, your take-home message first.
Take-home message is a simple one. So we use n number of classifications and we decide surgery is based upon the classification. But sometimes you have to violate the classification system for the patient benefit. And sometimes when you go back and listen about one story, what I tell is everybody crossed through the MS ortho examination and the spine fellowship examination. So the examiner asks all the questions you will answer, but he will ask the last question. If you answer that correctly, only you will be passed. And the last question is what the patient wants. It's not always the surgeon wants or the classification wants. So that's how I would have gone for a little aggressive management based upon the patient or the surgeon perspective. But at the end of the day, the outcome should be good. That's what it's needed.
No harm. That's most important.
Yeah. And one case is about non-contiguous spinal fractures. So I operated only 2 or 3 patients as they are severely injured patients. This patient with an L4 and L1 burst fracture is Asia C. It is due to the bus collusion. The young patient was in the sleeper bed and a bus is collided in front of a lorry. So after that, he got an injury of L1 and L1 burst fracture, trochanteric fracture, and an ankle fracture. This patient was stable, so I decided for a spine fixation immediately. So what are the options available for this patient? We can leave it only for the L4 or we have to fix L1. Thoughts from the group?
Yeah, that's a good question.
What is the age of the patient?
Age of the patient is 31.
In this patient, I would like to fix the issue of L4 only and daily L1 conservatively.
What is the classification that is applied for L1, Dr. Yogesh? Is it stable if you apply it separately?
No, it's a stable fracture. There's no retropulsion. It is A3.
No PLC involvement.
No PLC involvement. I don't have an MRI right now, but the MRI, everything. This case was done 1 year before.
I think it is better to do minimal and fix only the lower level. But you have to inform the patient and take a combined decision.
Yes, agree with the points. So the second thing is patient is an young one and patient is already having a multiple fractures. I told a trochanteric fracture and an ankle fracture. So to every time move away from the bed, he need to move his whole body, which invariably have some kind of flexion distraction at the L1, even if you put a brace. Agree with my points or not?
No, see the point of treating conservatively, this comes only if it is a stable fracture. And I don't agree that the brace is going to help unstable or a stable fracture. Brace is, I feel, most of the times it's just a psychological feel.
See, he's a ACSC patient. He's going to be bedridden for quite some time. So he's not going to walk immediately with the other injuries. So I think you can better conserve L1. No, that is what I would think. If it is a stable fracture, of course. If it is unstable, then there is no question. You have to fix it.
Yeah. So presume it is a stable, right? Yogesh, the above one is stable.
Yeah.
Age is 31.
31.
Yeah,
I thought all the permutation and combinations, and my point of fixing both is number one, because he has an other fracture, he need to have at least a stable sitting without a pain. That is for the earliest recovery. And second thing is Asia C is being preoperative, predicted based upon his other injuries, because he is not cooperative very well. So it is Asia C or Asia D is a doubtful one. So I thought of fixing both the fractures at a single setting.
Asia C at the level of?
Asia C at the level of L4.
Okay. So
you mean to say the indication is for rehabilitation long term?
No. It's not for rehabilitation.
No, rehabilitation in the sense getting out of it.
No, yeah. Rehabilitation in the sense like early mobilization.
Okay. So since you have fixed the, I presume that you have fixed both the fractures now. So would you think of skip fixations, thinking that the above is also unstable, below is unstable?
No, that's what this is a little bit a rare entity, and during fixation of these cases, I also talked with many persons whether to do only a limited fixation, whether to go for an L1 alone, L4 alone, leave the L1, and next is a limited fixations. But
you'll say one level.
One level up, one below, and one level up.
If you do a skip fixation, you would save a 2 disc.
You will save L2, L3, isn't it?
5, 4, 3. So 3 to 5 will be one fixation.
Yeah.
One disc.
Yeah, only one level will
save one disc.
So one disc, I am not going to do it.
Yeah, then there is no point in that.
No point. If it is a 2.
Okay. So yes, I done a long fixation, and this patient recovered very well. Within 6 months, he can able to walk without a support with Asia E.
You fix the sacrum also here?
No, S1.
S1.
Yeah, it's fixed.
Because it's an L4, I would have stopped at L5, but since the combination and all the things is more, I thought of going up to S1. 2-level fixation down.
So I would have done, presuming only stable above, I would have done a smaller fixation of this. If it is unstable, yeah, we can go up to L5. Why?
Yeah, the next case is coming up from. So this the one. It has an
You have too
L5
many
burst.
contiguous fractures, man.
Huh?
Too many fractures, non-contiguous fractures.
No, I have 4 in the series. That is what I am telling.
Superb, superb. Not common. Not at all common.
So this patient, again an young patient, road traffic accident with L1 burst, a big fragment in the central canal, and an L5 burst.
Young patient?
Yeah, young patient, 31.
What is the neurological status?
Asia A.
Oh.
Okay, okay. So, fix from top to bottom.
For this case, we would have suggested a limited fixation, short fixation for one fracture and short.
No. He is Asia A, right?
Yeah, he needs long-term sitting.
Yeah.
Sitting. He wants sitting.
Long-term sitting.
Yeah. So that's how, like I thought, and then it was a very devastating injury where he was thrown away from the vehicle and then with a fall of height. So it is a combination of an RTA and fall of height. Opening itself, like I found a lot of contusion, hematoma, discontinuity of the posterior ligamentous complex at L1 and L5, very bad injury. And this is what is done.
No, that's fine. He didn't have any abdominal injuries, this guy?
No, he didn't have any abdominal injury. He had a chest injury with hemothorax, which has been handed over by cardiothoracic surgeon, and he put a chest tube and we got it for surgery.
See, one question out of this box actually. So you have done from D11?
Yeah, T11.
T11 to S1. So this question always comes to my mind. Doing an iliac screw fixation for long constructs.
Yeah.
When do you do?
I think either you do an interbody in the last level or you fix an iliac screw.
Either of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yogesh?
Yeah. No, I not even thought about that.
But this patient is very thin patient. It looks very thin. If you put iliac screw, it will be subcutaneous.
You can go with
yeah, he's a very thin patient.
No, that's okay. You can go with the SIS screw.
SIS screw, okay. Oh, like that. Yeah.
The point is, of my thinking is, because as Rajan Babu told, if I do an L5S1 interbody fusion, you need not go to iliac. If you are not doing, you have to do an iliac screw. Point, right?
So then the one more question, what I need to ask is, these long fixations. So whether these people are coming for an implant removal or not, I'm not worried about the next patient who is Asia A and still in Asia B. I'm worried about this patient. I told after 6 months of follow-up, he's recovered to Asia E.
I won't remove Yogesh.
I don't think you should remove it. Because at this point, you cannot assess the mobility or the quality of the bone.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's a gamble. I don't think you should remove. Unless it is causing him severe symptoms and something. I don't think.
No, he doesn't have any symptom. He started going to his work, office, and all the things comfortably. In fact, he is driving and going nowadays.
I don't think you should touch it.
So the options for implant removal, if at all, will be taken as a call or not, because he is only 24 or 25, unmarried, and then.
But you have done laminectomy for him, or?
He has done.
This patient only at L4. Because it's Asia C, with respect to L4, I done a laminectomy at L4 and decompression.
Okay.
I would remove.
I don't think you should remove it. Because if he heal, definitely has a chance of going for some kyphosis.
It's not about this issue of kyphosis. I don't find an advantage of removing and then regaining his mobility.
That is also true.
No, it's a lot of hardware, right?
Hmm. And you have done an extensive surgery. You have done a laminectomy. Definitely would have induced a fusion,
Yeah.
even if it is just in instrumentation. You would have induced a fusion there. Okay.
So anyway, we'll definitely
Yeah.
waiting for this patient because he is very happy and he'll come back. He told doctor, please remove the screws and rods one day. So at the time, I'll ask the opinion what to do and what not to do.
Okay. Next, anything, Yogesh? Are we done?
Yeah, are we done? Any discussions and any questions?
Yogesh, I just had one doubt actually. I thought this TLX classification is only for thoracolumbar level. Can it be
No, it
applied
is-
for lower lumbar and upper thoracic?
Yes.
It is
Yes.
mainly for thoracolumbar. It is not for a lower lumbar because the cord ends at
Yeah, it is only for the levels which is extended for the cord. Then.
No, it is for a thoracolumbar also. Means thoracolumbar means lumbar also.
Up to L2.
Because when you
That
go
is what
back
I
to
was
the classification of a neurology, you can see a conus
Yogesh.
and cauda equina are there.
Yeah. I applied for.
It is for lumbar also. You see cauda equina syndrome?
Okay, I thought not for. I thought it was only for up to L2.
No, sir. It's there.
No.
To S1.
It is for thoracolumbar, lumbar also.
Okay. All right.
Any more cases you want to show up, Dr. Yogesh?
Hello? Yeah?
A word about MIS. So, just a word about MIS. The indications for MIS, as far as the TLX classification is considered, it is only for A and B and not for C. Anybody using MIS for C?
C is distraction, right?
Yeah.
Translation.
No.
Translation and dislocation.
Translation.
No. I don't do, at least.
You can reduce it.
So that's it. Any questions invited?
Anybody has done any dynamic fixation? Any experience with that?
Dynamic fixation for?
For trauma, where you want to remove these screws, especially.
No.
Dynamic
fixation I have not personally done, but I have assisted cases for my mentor during my fellowship times for degenerations.
Okay.
Like if you do an L4-5 T-leaf and you find an L3-4 disc that is not that great looking, then we L3 screw additionally, and between L3 and L4 there will be a dynamic implant, and L4-5 will be a routine rod.
Okay. All right.
Dionysus. Okay, so it was an excellent discussion we had today, and thanks.
Thank you, Ram. Thanks for the opportunity.
Good presentation, Yogesh.
Everyone came up for a nice discussion. Thanks, everyone.
One small.
Who is coming up? Any questions now?
Last but third case, what was the anterior implant, sir?
Which one?
In 53rd slide, I guess.
Expandable case.
Okay, is it some particular company, sir? I haven't seen that, why.
Globus.
Thank you, sir.
Globus case. Okay.
It is a Globus expandable cage.
Globus cage, yes.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Wonderful discussion.
No, one small observation.
Yes, sir.
Nothing. In the last 1 month of lockdown, there has been a spurt in spine injuries following fall from height. People
Due to
are
depression and suicide, sir?
No. It's not about that. Alcohol.
In our area. Yeah. That's
Yeah. We have operated 2 cases, sir. One from coconut tree, another from this Panamaram.
தென்னமரம் பனைமரம் ஏற போறாங்க.
Yeah, it's happening, sir. It's quite high now. And
Yes.
Salem, Dr. Vishnu did some tree. Pondicherry Prince has done some 2 cases. So many, all from fall from tree. Young people. That should not be done. Yeah. Okay, sir. Thanks.
Nice.
Bye.
Thank you all for joining and a good discussion. And thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Yogesh. Thanks. Bye. Good night.